And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. So today is March 18th, 2023 on a Saturday. In this week's episode, we'll be talking some interesting things, but none more so than the first topic we'll be covering, which is how a wrong decision could lead to the demise, or we'll see how it goes for a bank, in particular the problem that the Silicon Valley Bank is encountering right now, which is not good news. We'll talk about what led to their demise. And next is we'll be talking about the retro is always something that people will always come back, will become in fashion in a sense, and none more so than listen to musics, and particular vinyl record player, or vinyl record, how do you call it, vinyl plaque or disc, how do you call it, is doing has its revival here, outselling CDs, which if you haven't if you still remember that compact disc. And next is we'll be talking about the recently concluded Oscar Awards, where typically movies that are highlighted in the show tends to have a resurgence in terms of box office receipts. uh, hasn't gotten the same glamour as it once used to be. Is it because of the pandemic, or is it the films, or people getting tired of the wokeness that the academy or the film industry is perpetrating here? So we'll take a look. And some local news regarding the push for governments to push for more infrastructure project, which is necessary for the progress of any country. But is it the right projects that we're looking at? So we'll take a look at that as well. And sadly, an incident that happened that has severe repercussion for our environmental damages, which is none other than a an oil tanker that spilled oil in in somewhere in the southern region in Occidental Mindoro, I think. So we'll take a look at that. So what's the government to do? Who's liable here? And is there going to be a long-lasting, damage that could severely hamper not just the business for people, but also for animals that are cohabitating with our oceans here. Anyway, so for our first one, as mentioned, what the recent topic on the Silicon Valley, the failure that it is where it is right now, simply because of a wrong decision. And obviously, uh, typically a bank is normally foolproof, obviously getting money by investors or depositors to deposit their banks in their bank, and the bank in turn use that money to invest it or to loan it to other businesses here. And with the exception of how they invested their capital, which led to where they are today. So let's take a closer look. So here at businessinsider.com, it mentions that why did Silicon Valley fail. And it mentions here that the Silicon Valley Bank made a bold call on where to invest cash, and obviously it backfired now. In the case that they would normally loan it to other businesses, which there was no demand for their loans, they instead invested heavily on securities. Now, it was mentioned here in the article that there are two types of securities that they focused on: short-term assets versus long-term assets here. And they heavily relied on the long-term assets that they call it. Or was it that they, where was it? Hmm. Yes, held to maturity. That's for the long-term investments and as available for sale, which is short-term assets here. And obviously, what happened here when those investors or depositors, in this case, tech startup, wanted to get their money back, and obviously when they needed liquid cash, they had to get it somewhere. And in the sad case here, they had to take a loss in their available for sale or short-term assets, which led to the demise of the company. And they tried to stave off the problem by holding a meeting so that they could raise more capital so that they could stay afloat in this situation. And obviously that did not happen. And from there it went went south. So you can see here, so you can see here how much money was invested, rightly or wrongly. So as you can see here, on a cost basis, shorter duration of AFS book grew from 13.9 billion to 27 billion at its peak in the first quarter of 2022, while the longer duration HTM book grew by much more, from 13 billion to almost 100 billion dollars here, which is no small feat. And obviously when the rates went up, which what's happening now in the United States, the assets plunge, and that's never a good thing. And how you're going to repay those is a big problem. And what's interesting, the paper losses didn't register on Silicon Valley Bank's balance sheet, and over time they would indeed mature, rolling off the balance sheet altogether. And when depositors started to ask for their money back, that's where the problems started to trickle in, and little by little. And when that happens, and you had to sell some of their securities that they have invested, and they had to have enough cash to return to depositors, which they didn't, because they have heavily invested in the HTM or long-term assets. The losses piled up quickly and wiped out the bank's capital entirely. And the question here is, will there be a bailout that's going to happen, or will it be, they'll be left on their own here? So we don't know. And things like this often happens whether you're a small business or a large business. And obviously the bigger you are, the term is too big to fail is always used. And it's not just the banks that are affected. Obviously businesses are affected, other investors that had invested. And if the bank closes, your money that's invested in the company, it suddenly went up in the air, becomes useless anymore. So we'll see how that pans out. Anyway, continuing with our next topic, as mentioned earlier, so the music industry, obviously people still like listening to music, different forms, from way back in past few decades to where it is today, where digital music has been, seen the rise of popularity because of its convenience, right? But what's interesting, retro is always, has a way of coming back in terms of rising popularity. And in this case, vinyl music or records has now outsold CDs, compact discs, round disc, if you remember, for the first time in almost 3 to 4 decades, with 41 million records sold in 2022 alone. So according to techspot.com, the vinyl records now account for over 71% of all physical media sales. And but obviously physical media is only a small portion of the entire music industry, wherein majority, I'm assuming, is focused primarily on digital music, wherein people download their favorite musics, watch it online using Spotify or whatever apps that they prefer. Is still king nowadays. But I think this is just my opinion, that obviously music, people will still love to listen to music regardless of the form, whether it's the traditional, having a physical copy, whether it's cassette tape, CDs, DVDs, whatever you want to call it, and versus digital music. Obviously, this is good that people are still interested in traditional forms of music storages and vinyl. The industry of making vinyl has seen the rise of popularity. Actually, one of my good friends who has a vinyl record player, listens to vinyl records. And although you cannot just simply bring it anywhere, but obviously at home, the quality of music, as they say, is somewhat different compared to digitally made music, or or played digitally compared to actual vinyl. And you have a player that has that can place those records, will have a different sounding. I don't know, I could be wrong here, but that's what he says according to his experience here. Anyway, it's mentioned here that the increased interest in vinyl records over the last few years, uh, groove disc sales have exceeded the CD revenue since 2020 now, even though the pandemic occurred, right? However, unit shipments finally eclipsed this year thanks to a 17% uptick in vinyl and 80% decline in CD. So obviously, the preference of one form of music, where you play it over the other, tends to vary from time to time. And obviously, CD is much easier to transport or play it, and you can have stacks of CDs. I bought several CDs way back in my younger days, and I don't know where they are right now. If they're still stored in our storage, or they were thrown away already. But anyway, so obviously, if you go to record bars, you'll see, it's not just CDs, but piles of vinyl records being sold nationwide or even worldwide. And you know re- printing or making new vinyl is on the rise. And the rise of popularity is growing, but still it pales in comparison to how streaming services or digital formats have generated in terms of revenue. It only grew by 6%, but it has generated close to $16 billion in revenue, which has a market share of close to 92 to 93% of the music market share, which is a pretty significant. Which goes to show that people are interested in convenience, so they prefer even I prefer the digital format. But obviously, if you're prefer the old school listening to music, and if you can afford it, and if you have the space, and obviously people will have their preference here, which is kind of surprising when I looked at this article. Anyway, speaking of movies, the recently concluded Oscars, I don't know if you watched them. I did not, uh, for quite some time. There was this article mentions that typically when films that are promoted or discussed in the Oscars, or whoever wins the prestigious awards and so forth, tends to have a boost in terms of box office performances. And typically they are coincided because those films that are showcased in the Oscars are typically still showing in the movie theaters. But that's not the case anymore in this scenario. So let's take a closer look. According to CNBC.com, the Oscar box office bump is now shrinking. Now, whether that be the popularity of the Oscars clout is waning, or are the films really not that good? So it may be, won an Oscar for Best Picture, Best Film, Best Actor, whatever the case may be. Overall, is the film any good? And, many of the being highlighted in the Oscars, which I haven't seen many of those. And I think the top winners of that Oscar is, yeah, the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. We're in the best actor. Brandon Fraser won the best actor, and it also won best picture, I think. So there are winners and losers, but did it generate more revenue for the film? It says anyway. It mentions here that When nominations were announced in late January, 10 Best Picture nominees added 82 million in the box office sales, which obviously is a good thing. But is it comparable to years of past? And what's interesting is 71 million of which came from Avatar. So obviously it's only skewed because of one of the, I won't say better films, but highly anticipated sequels for the past decade or so. And as mentioned, Best Picture nominations have boosted demand on streaming side, however. And you know obviously the Oscars tends to generate a lot of buzz, and people are curious as to what are the films being showcased, and people would tend to check it out. So even though there's already a bell curve or the waning popularity of certain films, there will be a certain increase again because of the buzz. And obviously if the film is good, people will continue watching it, and if it's bad, people would stop watching it and no one would even recommend it. Let's see here who are the films best perform. As mentioned, I think the Avatar is one, as mentioned. Then you have Top Gun Maverick is another one, and obviously the film of Michelle Yeoh and Brandon Fraser, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I might check it out in the future, but not necessarily right now, right away. But it was mentioned here in the article that in the past, films like 1917, Hidden Figures, and Silver Linings Playbook, which were merely nominated for the award, generated 50% more of their domestic box office revenue after scoring another. And obviously, it's a akin more to more marketing, positive marketing, obviously being recognized as one of the best films of that year, which is kind of tricky because obviously, how does the Oscar uh, committee decide which are going to be considered for any recognition? Who knows? And how do they decide who the winner is? It's not mentioned how they what the criteria is, but it's for another discussion here. But what's interesting here is all the Best Picture nominees this year saw less than 13% revenue from post nomination. So you're talking of Woman Talking, one of the smaller films up for the award, generated 77 of its revenue after the nomination, or around 3.9 million. So it's not a big film. So even though it created a lot of hype, did it get the desired promotion that it did? Maybe, maybe not. So obviously, this phenomenon, as mentioned by Brandon Katz, it's not anything new. It's just like a form of marketing. Obviously, the big extravaganza, which is the Oscars, tends to help that cause. But obviously, with how films have soured the taste of many moviegoers, and how the Oscars have turned into something totally different to what they used to be of years and decades past. The majority of viewers have turned off. That's why the low ratings has 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 slumped the TV ratings and of its popularity here. But obviously, it's still popular for those who are in the movie industry as a whole here. Anyway, so we'll see if the film is that good. But as mentioned here, many of the films that was released, obviously the before the Oscars, typically around mid-year. So in this case, you have Maverick that was released last May. You have Elvis around June. Triangle of Sadness last September. You have Tar on October, and then Woman Talking last December, and Avatar last December also. And obviously, the more recent, I think, the ones who tends to benefit more in terms of its marketing is the one who is released more recently, that is close to the Oscar, so that it will get that bump in terms of revenue on the box office. Anyway, for some local news, we've talked about how governments, in particular our government here in the Philippines, from the Duterte administration, who's been focusing primarily on the build infrastructure projects. The current administration, the Marcos administration, is stepping up and pivoting from the Duterte era to focus on other infrastructure projects and other projects as a whole here. And according to the Inquirer.net here. So they're pushing for OD projects. So let's take a closer look. So the 34 projects that the government will pursue in partnership with the private sector have added 13 public-private partnership projects that started with the Duterte administration to account for a combination one-fourth of the Marcos administration 9 trillion pipeline infrastructure flagship projects, which was announced recently. So among the 34 additional projects, 4 are already ongoing, namely the Cavite Laguna Expressway, Phase 1, the Central Luzon Link Expressway segment, 8.2 of the North Luzon Expressway, Mindanao Avenue to Commonwealth Avenue, and segment 1 of the Luzon, South Luzon Express Tollway, Road 5, Lucena City to Quezon, in Quezon Province to Matnog in Sorsogon. Now, you know, none of those projects I've noticed that the focus in shifting to rather than building more highways to focus ease the traffic on the road. Why not focus on building more subways or train systems that will interconnect from north to south, southern parts of the Luzon area, which I think could massively reduce the severe traffic that we are encountering right now because obviously we don't have enough public transportation, we don't have enough roads, and if you use buses and it's occupying the same space as private vehicles, and more vehicles are on the road which cannot accommodate, you know especially on peak hours, and which cause a lot of congestion, which I've experienced last week when I was at EDSA, which normally should take 30 minutes, took me an hour or two to get from BGC going back to Manila at the evening, and I had to adjust my timetable to be able to factor in the traffic along the way. But anyway, so in the different infrastructure here, obviously the goal is to improve the society in terms of making it easier for people to travel, transportation of goods and services from the provinces all the way to the city and vice versa. But having partnerships with private companies, is this the will this benefit the people in general? Because obviously, look at the expressways. The expressways are not freeways, and you have to pay a toll. And if you have to pay a toll on top of having to drive, fueling your vehicles, which added a lot of cost. And if you were to use, let's say, public transportation, let's say the LRT system or MRT system, you don't have to pay additional. You just pay a basic fee, and you get to point A to point B, hopefully quickly. Which I think we should invest more, and not just light rail system or transit, maybe even subways that will interconnect different parts of the metro here. Well, that's my ambition. Hopefully, you know, that will happen in my lifetime here. Hopefully. Anyway, for our last topic, as mentioned earlier, staying here in local news, the recent oil spill that occurred in the southern region, in particular in where was it? Yeah, in Oriental Mindoro, wherein an oil spill occurred. And what's interesting here is, even though I think that whoever was at fault there, the company, or who owns the company, I think it was MT Princess Empress. Even though they insured for 1 billion, is 1 billion enough to save the environment, which has wreaked havoc? Obviously, the oil spill is not easy to do, and I don't know if we have the manpower, the resources to be able to clean up those mess. And obviously, when you talk of ocean, it has already reached in different parts of our provinces, and obviously it's not just on the effect on people, but also on the ocean life as we know it. And many of our fellow countrymen who relies on fishing, and the fish relies on the corals or the ecosystem, which is the vast ocean that we have. And if it's affected by by spillage like this one, can be detrimental to our ecosystem, which is kind of sad to see. Anyway, it mentions here at rappler.com that will who will when will they pay those aggravated parties here, i.e. the people in those regional areas, and obviously the business that's going to be affected, especially that relies on tourism as a whole. It mentions here that RDC Reeled Marine Services should file an insurance claim for the oil spill and help affected communities. Marina spokesperson Sharon Aledo says, no, I think they should be sued for negligence for when that occurred here, regardless if it were their fault or not their fault. Obviously, to ensure that any other companies or shipping companies that's going to ferry different products, or in this case gases or oils, safety should be at the forefront of any businesses here. Anyway, the oil tanker MT Princess mentioned, which sank off Nahuan Oriental Mindoro with 800,000 liters of industrial oil, is insured for 1 billion, which the ship owner should claim. Not just claim, but they should pay that to pay off the damages that they have caused in our environment here. And according to an interview at TV5, Sharon Aledo, spokesperson of Maritime Industry Authority, or Marina, said that the MT Princess Empress, which is owned by RDC, Real Marine Services, is covered with the insurance protection and indemnity for every incident, including an oil spill. Now, has met with the shipping company owners who told regulators that the ship was insured. Yeah, but I keep hearing that they insured. Are they going to be held liable for the incident that occurred there? Because regardless of if they're at fault or not, I mean, the fact that they caused the incident because of the spillage of the oil, is a disasters of biblical proportion here, if you think about it. Anyway, it mentions that the Marina regulates the Philippine maritime industry. Its mandate is to lead progressive maritime administration for safer people, safer ships, and cleaner environment. But the question here is, are they going to be held liable here? Why are they focusing on the insurance aspect rather than, what are they going to do to stop the spillage, or is there any contingencies for managing this problem? Otherwise, if it continues to spill, obviously, it's going to maybe take years or even decades or centuries to be able to clean up the piles of mess. Think of what happened during the Fukushima incident a few years back. Now, obviously, that's a more severe situation with the power plant disruption and explosion, but still the environmental impact can be felt not just in that particular area but in other regions as well, which is obviously we want to take care of our environment because we only have one planet to live, and it's not as if we can just simply pack up and move to a different city, country, or in this case a different planet altogether here. But we will see how the government addresses this, and how will the company skirt off from this responsibility, or will they just uh, let it be? Hopefully not, because this is not good for our environment, for anyone for that matter. Anyway, that's about it for this week's discussion. Hopefully we can have this regular discussion on Saturdays, I think, hopefully. Anyway, leave your comments down below if you found any of the topics interesting, questions, or disagreements that you think that the companies or the topics that we've discussed, the situation that occurred here. But anyway, if you're interested, you want to continue to support the channels, don't forget to check out videos released every not every Monday, but Mondays for Monday checklist, and every Wednesdays for business update. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.